Hi there, welcome to lesson 35. In this lesson we will be looking at gears. The first gear we will be drawing is the Spur Gear. This gear is the most common gear there is. Then we will look at the Helical Gear, which is a variation of the Spur Gear but twisted. After that we will be looking at the Bevel Gear, which changes the direction of force. Lastly, we'll take a look at the Worm Gear, which also uses a Spur Gear, and I'll explain that later. So first of all, there's these kind of gears that we'll be looking at, and then there are more gears: the Screw Gear, Spiral, Mitre, Internal, Rack and Pinion, Herringbone, and the Hypoid gears. Now all of these gears are variations of this set of gears. So if you do a little bit of research, you'll find all of these gears, and you'll see that most of these gears have something in common with all of these. So once you know how to draw a Spur Gear, a Helical Gear, a Bevel Gear, and a Worm Gear, you should be able to do the others as well. Right, so let's get started. As per usual, we will be using a rough drawing layer. Our drawing will not be technically correct, so you can't use this in technical drawings. Drawing gears for technical purposes has got a formula, so it's very complicated but very intriguing. If you search tutorials on how to draw technical gears, technical drawing of a gear, you'll see that there's an almost infinite number of calculations that you need to do to get a gear technically correct and strong for the purpose. For our purpose, we will be drawing a decorative gear or illustrative gear. It's not going to be technically correct. So there's a few challenges. There are a few challenges when drawing gears. For instance, we need to have a circle, and we need to get the gears precisely spaced. Now in other software they've got tools to do that. In Krita there's no tool to do that, but there are a few shortcuts we can use, or workarounds that we can use to get to where we need to get to get a gear. So let's talk about gears before we get into gears. Usually a gear has got a hole for the shaft, then metal to support the gears that it's placed on. Then there's another circle that we need to draw, and yet another circle. Now if you look at the tooth, the teeth of a gear, or tooth, or we're just going to do one, it has this part which they call the addendum, and this part which they call the dedendum, so the part that goes down. So this is the addendum, and that's the dedendum, so it's going down, and we need this circle to draw the point where that intersection is for the gear tooth. Right, so we need a few circles then. So use the circle tool, but before you use the circle tool, make sure your brush has the right color that you prefer. I'm going to use a very bright color so that it's easy to see, and that's not easy to see. I'm just going to make it maybe, let's go with red. Right, and then make the brush smaller as well. And before I start my circle, my first circle, I draw a dot, so that will be the center of my circle, because we want to draw a few circles from that point. So click, then press Shift and Control, and draw the center for the shaft. Then do it again for the body of the gear. Then do it again, and this time we are going to draw that circle for the intersection, and yet another circle for the outside of the tooth. Right, so I try to keep this more or less equal. No, let's do that again. Maybe make it slightly smaller. About there. Right. That should be fine, so that when we draw the tooth in, that we can basically do this. And why we are doing the side view of the gear, it's going to be very, very difficult to do that in isometric perspective, drawing all of that. So you're going to have a lot of guidelines, and we will be getting confused where each and every one is, and to make it accurate as well. So that's why I do it the straight on view, the side view. Right, so that's our rough drawing or our guide layer. I'm going to create a new layer on top of that. So this is the layer that we're actually going to use to draw the gear. Now, this is our guide basically. The problem is, how do we get 20 teeth around the gear and only drawing one tooth? So you can do that and then duplicate that and copy it around, but it's not going to be accurate. So there's another very special tool in Krita, and that is called the multi-brush tool. So we're going to go to the tool options. Where are the tool options? All right, let's quickly look for that window. Settings, configure, Docker. So let's go to Dockers and look for tool options. So it must be there. There's two options. Right. So I've got two options here. I had it at the top, so I'm going to move that to the top because I had it there before. So I'm just going to drop it into this section and just move it to the side. Now, if you look at symmetry, we've got a few symmetry options. Leave it at symmetry. No, let's go quickly to origin. Right, so we'll get to that. Right, so leave it at symmetry for the moment. Click on show origin, and then using the move tool, you can the move button, you move the center of this multi-brush tool to the center of your circle. Once you leave it and you want to start, once you leave it and you want to move it again, you will have to click move again, just to make sure that, or to activate it again. So just make sure it's right dead center. Now, if you look at what I do here, I can draw and it will multiply it around the circle. Another thing you want to do is you can set the brush with the amount of brushes. For our purpose, we want to draw 20 or however many tooth you want to put into your gear. You can make it less, you can make it more, but if you make it less, you will have to make the tooth a little bit bigger, or the teeth. So I'm going to set it to 20. You can do whatever you want to do, but for now, let's leave it at that. Then I want to select a new color, maybe a grayish blue color, and that should be fine. And we need to measure. So we want to halve this, and you want to create another division in there and at the bottom as well. So that's going to be the base of the tooth, the teeth. All right, at the top of the tooth, it narrows down a little bit like that. and then it's going to widen the where it goes into the addendum, dedendum, and we can narrow this down a little bit as well. So that's going to be the top part of the tooth. Then it widens a little bit there, goes down, narrows slightly, and then it goes into the bottom of the gear. Okay, now you can adjust this slightly, widening this, maybe bring it in a little bit. So play around with your gear until it looks right, or to your liking. Right, so now we've got 20 teeth around this gear. I'm going to erase the parts I don't want. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. Does it look good from this distance? I'm happy with that. Of course, you can make it a little bit more neater or more precise to your liking. I'm going to stick with that. While we've got the 20 brushes, I'm going to draw the circle. So this is going to be an easy, you're just going to draw that little bit there. I want to bring the brushes down to 5 now, because we want to draw those hollow bits in there. And using a brush, I'm just going to change the color to something different and maybe light, because this is just going to be my guide. So draw maybe slightly darker. It will help if you draw another circle. What I'm going to do is just going to use this and make it slightly smaller for now. Back to my paint layer. Okay, just need to select that. We want a bit of a bevel in there. So it doesn't matter where you draw, it will copy it all over the gear, all over the radial symmetry. Right, then let's draw that a little bit, make that a little bit smaller for the inside of that. Make sure you select your, let's rename that Spur Gear Guide. Okay, and make sure that you select your multi-brush tool again and give it a bit of a bevel in there, and then complete the circle. And voila, easy. That's how you draw a gear in isometric perspective, but we're not done yet. So let us, before we do anything, we just need to deselect or disable show origin. We can delete the rough drawing for now, and we are going to duplicate this layer. So Control J, then select both layers. Make sure that you've selected both layers. Control T on the keyboard, rotate it until it is in line with your isometric grid. So make sure that it's aligned. Then if you hover your brush or your mouse, your pen, or whatever you've got over this line, you'll see that there's 2 arrows pointing in different opposing directions. So now when you click and drag, you can twist this into, or warp this into isometric perspective. Right? Don't apply or click enter yet, because we want to make sure that it fits the grid precisely. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So let's pull that a little bit more to fit the 4 squares. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. So we need to narrow it down to 4 squares. and you might need to do a bit of adjustment again. Just make sure that it is as close to the grid as possible. So always equal squares on all sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So, and then once you press enter, you've got a gear in isometric. So I'm going to select the top gear layer, pull it up a little bit. So however thick you want your gear to be. So let's make a, I don't want to make it too thick because I want to see the thickness of the gear in the holes as well. So I'm just going to pull it up to about there. And I'm going to select the lower gear and change the color. So Control U, because now it's going to be difficult to see which part of the gear is which part. So just change the hue to something slightly different. Maybe make it slightly lighter as well, and press OK. So now we've got the top of the gear and the bottom of the gear. So this is going to be our guy to draw on. Create a new layer on top of everything else. So let's group that, and let's call that Spur Gear Reference. Lock that layer so that you don't accidentally draw on any of those. And then let's call this the Spur Gear. Spur Gear Drawing. Right. And now we need to set our colors to the default because we want to use black. Brush. So just pressing B on the keyboard will make sure that you've got the freehand brush. And now it's just a matter of tracing. But before we trace, we need to make sure that our gear follows the correct lines. Now, where's my ruler? Wait a minute. Let's make this easier. Let's enable the mirror tool. Let's bring it right into the center. Now, if you look at the gear, you'll see it is symmetrical. So this side looks exactly like this side. Why waste time when we can use the symmetry tool for drawing gears? But it's going to work for this gear, but not for the other gears. But let's use this for this gear. So here goes. For the center of the gear, this is not going to work. The symmetry will not work because we've got this shape in here, but it's not going to follow that. So we're not going to use the mirror tool for that. So let's remove those, delete. Now you reactivate that because we are going to draw the teeth quickly, or not quickly, using the symmetry tool. And then disable symmetry. Let's erase that quickly. Right, and then we are going to draw these as well. One by one. No more cheating. With that done, we can now remove or just disable the reference layer or the rough drawing at the bottom. You can keep that, but I'm going to delete mine. Then using the wand tool, the wand selection tool, I'm going to select, make sure that you've got your layer selected. I'm going to select the outside, make sure that your tool has got these settings. Select regions found from the active layer. So if you've got that selected, enabled, you can click on the outside of the gear. Then we're going to use, hold shift in whilst selecting the insides of the gear or the gaps. Then Shift Control I to invert the selection. And once you've done that, just click select the layer underneath the Spur Gear layer and click and select Fill Layer and select a color for your gear. Let's make it red for this one. Okay, duplicate that layer and right click Properties and make that slightly lighter, like so. Then using the wand tool, make sure that you've got the Spur Gear drawing selected. Select the top of the gear, go back to your lighter layer, and we want to invert the selection because we want to delete the lighter, the darker part, so the part that goes down. Shift Control I and press delete on your keyboard, and that's how you color your gears. So select the Spur Gear and the layers below it. You can either group it or Control E. So Control G to group it. I'm going to Control E to merge that into one single layer. And let's make sure that it's still called Spur Gear. And that is how you draw a gear in isometric perspective. So let's put this gear, oh, it's almost fitting that gear. Anyway, so the next gear we are going to draw is the Helical Gear. Now the Helical Gear is, it's a Spur Gear, and we're going to use the same principle of drawing the gear, and then we are going to twist the top of the gear and then split that. But let's get into it. So I'm going to create a new layer and let's call this Helical Rough. Right, we're going to do the same again. Use the circle tool, but before we do that, let's make sure that our brush is set to whatever we want it to. So maybe a green this time. Let's make we want to duplicate that gear now. Control J. Let's change the color. Control U, and change it to a slightly different color. Say, for instance, a red color. All right. So now press Control T on the keyboard. Rotate it till the gears overlap. The teeth overlap like so. Press Enter on your keyboard and select the bottom layer again. So we want to select both layers. Now press Control T again, and we're going to do the same for this gear. We want to rotate it until it aligns with the grid. Make sure it aligns. And then we want to warp it till it aligns with the other side of the grid. Like so. I'm going to move it so that it follows the lines, and you'll see that this line is not perfect, so just tweak it a little bit. Now we want to bring it back to, say, 3 blocks and 3 blocks. So it needs to be 3 by 3, and that's good. Now select the top layer, and I'm pressing T on the keyboard to get the move tool. So if you hover over any of the tools, you'll see that there's a keyboard shortcut for each of the tools. I'm going to use the T to bring up my gear, like so. Okay, you can make the gear thicker or thinner, whichever way you want your gear to be. Now, while we've got that selected, let's make sure that we've got a different color, maybe a yellow or a green color. And again, using the brush tool, we are this can get confusing. So I want to make sure that I know that this gear and this gear needs to be connected. Maybe let's make that darker. All right. Right, so I'm going to use the same trick, pressing V on the keyboard. If you click and then press V, it's not going to do it. So you have to press V on the keyboard first and draw your line. Okay, and why it's getting confusing is because here it changes direction because of how we view it, the angle that we're viewing it from. Right, so we want to take it to there. Rather take it to the gear at the bottom instead of just leaving it empty. So don't do this. Draw it through the gear. If it's getting confusing here, start this side again and then draw. Right, now you can see that we've got the basics of our helical gear. Create a new layer on top of these. I'm going to merge those together. I'm going to lock that layer so that I don't accidentally draw on that. And we use the mirror tool for the last gear that we drew, but for this gear it's not going to work. Let me show you why it's not going to work. Brush. Let's press D on the keyboard. So if we draw this gear now, you'll see it's not going to line up with any of the other gears. So we have to do this the long and hard way. And just in case you don't see the mirror tool, maybe it's to the far side when you are zoomed into your gear and you enable it, you won't see it. So just make sure, zoom out a little bit and make sure that you set it to the center of your gear. Or whatever thing you want to mirror. Maybe you want to draw a little face. And this is a very nice tool to use when you need to draw symmetry. Boom. Right, so don't forget to use the symmetry tool for stuff that you want to do quick and easy. Right, so now we can remove our reference drawing. We don't need that anymore. Right, same story. Make sure that you've got your helical gear selected. Then using the magic wand tool, select the outside, the gap in the middle, Shift Control I to invert that, select the layer below it, and use the full layer to give your gear a color. So let's make this gear, let's make it dark pink, like that. I like it. So let's make it like that. I'm gonna desaturate it slightly. Okay. Then using the wand tool again, make sure that you've got the gear layer, the drawing layer selected. Select the inside, add fill layer. Using the eyedropper tool, select the color and then just make it slightly lighter, like so. Right, so select all of that. You can group that together by pressing Control G. So now it's a group. Let's call that Helical Gear. And then deselect, Shift Control A, and then move your tool. Oh, okay, so now it's done that. Right. I'm going to merge that, Control E. If it does this, I'm just lazy. Control E, then using the lasso tool, I'm going to select my layer, Control C, Control V, delete the bottom layer, and then T to move the gear. Right, so it's not going to mesh with that one. So if you want to flip it around, remember it's symmetrical to the center. It's not symmetrical in teeth, but it will work. So if I press Control T and click flip horizontal, it should look right. So now we can try and mesh it with that gear. Okay, we need to do a bit of editing or whatever. So this is just to demonstrate that these kind of gears go together. Right. The next gear we are going to draw is the Bevel Gear, and usually they have these. The Bevel Gear works in this way. So I'm just going to draw a quick diagram. So you've got a Bevel Gear that goes like this, and the shaft goes in that direction. Then you've got another Bevel Gear that sits on top of this one, and the shaft goes in that direction. And usually the force comes into this one and then delivers it into a new direction. So it's just to change the direction of force when you use bevel gears. Now I made a little mistake in here. There should be a skirt or bevel for this gear at the bottom. So it's not actually, bevel gears doesn't look like this. So we need to create a gear that looks more like this. And there's a way to do this as well. So let's get to it. Right, so okay, let's quickly discuss what we want to do before we get into the detail of it, because if you understand how to think things through, it's going to be easy to do them. So we've got the top of the gear, and we've got the bottom of the teeth, I mean. So we've got the top, so we've got that going. So if you keep thinking in terms of where the top and the bottom of it is, you will understand. Now for the bevel, we need to do something slightly different. So we've got the top here, and we need to bring the bevel in a little bit so that it slopes. So when we look at the gear from the side, it's going to look like this. And that rounding, that needs to go in a little bit. So we are going to bring this part, we're going to create a diagram for that, and then just bring this out a little bit. So make it slightly larger, or that one slightly smaller. But I'm talking inconsistently. So let's get to work so that you can see what I mean. We are going to create another circle. Sure that you make a dot, then click on the dot, shift control to make sure that it's center on the dot, and then we are going to use the multi-brush tool, show, and then move. Right, create a new layer. And remember what we did with the previous tutorials or previous gears. We divided that in half. Right, so now we want to draw the bottom of the gear, but this time we're only going to use a diagram. So we want to draw the bottom of the gear. So keep that in line. So we're going to draw the bottom of the gear and the top of the gear, but we're going to keep it in separate layers. So control. So the top of the gear is going to be there. Create a new layer, and the bottom of the gear is going to be there. Change the color. So we make sure that it's more or less in line with each other, like so. Right. Okay, I think that's fine. So let's delete that layer. So we've got two dotted lines now. And we want to, all right, so for the top of the gear, we actually want the overlaps to be on the same level. So select both layers, Control J, right? And then we need to select the bottom one, Control T, and then, no, the other one, Control T, and make sure that it's the same size as the other one. Enter, then select both the two top layers. So this is going to be the top one. So this needs to be in line with each other. Then press Control T and make that as small as the top is going to be. Let's not make it too small. So let me quickly explain. So the green part will be the part of the gear that's going to stick out. The red part is going to be the part that is at the bottom. So it's going to go something like this, and that will create our bevel. The top part needs to be in line because this is on the same level. It's just up and down, but on the same plane. So that's why we made this circle the same and this one different to each other. Right, so now we need to select all of the layers. Let me quickly erase that again. So all of these, right, and then Control T to, no, there's still something on that side. Right, then Control T, rotate again so that it aligns with the grid in this direction. Right, and then skew it so that it aligns with the grid in that direction. Okay, bring it down so that it fits this square here, and you'll see that it's not aligned in this direction. Okay, again, let's make it 4 squares this time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. So we need to bring this in so that it fits in 4 squares. And then press enter. So we want the smaller circles to be higher to create the height of the bevel. So bring that up a little bit. And the green is going to be the top of the gear, or the height of the teeth. So let's select the green. Let's bring that up. So that's how high the teeth is going to be. Right, we need to do the same for the bottom. So the red will be the lower part of the gear or the teeth, and we need to bring that down. Don't bring it down too far. About there. That should work. Maybe too high. Let's bring it in. let's bring it lower because we are not going to see the curves in here. Right, so and then group that or merge that together. So this is going to be our rough drawing. So create another layer on top of that, and this is where we are going to do our curly bits. So let's select a different color that stands out. So maybe blue. Now let's pick blue. And then using your brush tool, we are going to fill that in. Now, this again, this is a symmetrical gear, so we can use the symmetry tool to make life much, much easier. Okay. Then let's use the brush tool. Right, so we need to make sure that the gears, the teeth fit into each other. Another trick is to make a V, so very lightly draw a V from center to center. So that way you can see where your teeth needs to go. Very lightly. So you can even reduce the opacity. From green to red, from red to green, and so forth. Okay, this bit is going to be a bit tricky. Bring up the opacity again, and now it's just a matter of cleaning that up. Bit messy there, but it's going to make sense. Now we need to do the same here. So the red is the bottom part. You can do the straight lines before you do the round lines, but I'm gonna stick to my curvy lines. Although this is in the back side of the gear, rather draw it because we need that for the lines. So you'll see, we'll get there. Okay, let's make this a slightly different color because things are going to get confusing here. Let's disable the bottom layer for the moment. We might need that later on, but just disable that for the moment. Create a new layer on top of that, and this is going to be, okay, so that's the Bevel Gear rough. This is bevel, let's call it bevel or teeth rough. Right, so we want to connect these now. Again, so we need to create the lines that the edge of the gear basically. So let's try that. Okay, because this part is getting confusing, let's do the back first. So yeah, let's do it from there to and from there to there, just so that we know which part of the gear goes together. We won't see the bevel on this side, except maybe from here on. And it's getting messy. I know it looks messy, but if you just keep calm and collected, you should be able to see what you are doing. So let's change the colors so that we can see. So we've drawn that. So we've drawn that one. We've drawn that one. We need to do this one now. And there, all right, so let's leave that tooth out for the moment. Right, there we go. Okay, so that's the basics of drawing a Bevel Gear. All right, so it's still rough. We'll get to that. Something's wrong. No, nothing's wrong in here. We still need to bring in the bevel where this part of the gear looks something like this. So let's quickly disable that. So the gear goes down in a almost like a cone at the bottom as well. So we still need to bring that in. So I'm just going to draw lines like that, and maybe we only see this bit of the gear. I think that's the basics of it. Let's duplicate this circle again. Control J, T, bring it up, make it smaller, because this is gonna be where the gears, the flat bit of the gear will be. So if you look at the bevel gear, you'll see that there's a flat base at the bottom. Right. I'm going to duplicate that circle again, bring it down, Control T, and this is going to be the guide for the shaft. Let's group all of this into one layer. And let's call that Bevel Rough. Now, we can use the mirror tool again because the one side is identical to the other side. So let's make life easier for us, for ourselves. Right, lock that layer, create a new layer on top of that, press D on the keyboard to set your colors back to black and white, maybe lower the opacity of your Bevel Rough drawing. Let's call this Bevel Gear drawing. Right, so you've set your colors to black and white again by pressing D on the keyboard. Make sure your opacity is set to 100%. I've got a size 4 brush, depending on your size of your canvas, and the DPI. So for instance, this is the size of my canvas. If you want to follow along, I should have said that at the beginning, but basically a A4 at 72 DPI. Right, and now we start to draw the gears, the teeth. Yeah, the teeth. And that's how you do it. Not that difficult, right? Right? Do you agree? Not that difficult. All right, so let's quickly color this gear. Last but not least, we are going to look at the worm gear. So if you research the worm gear, you'll see that it's got a very specific usage, and I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but it's a very good gear for one directional movement. With all of the other gears, if you turn this gear will turn. If you turn this gear will turn. But with the worm gear, only the worm, this part of the gear, turns. But if you apply a force on the worm wheel, it will not rotate the worm gear. So it's very good for one directional force application. Right, so but let's get into the drawing of the worm gear. So the worm gear usually mesh with this kind of gear, a spur gear. So we'll have a spur gear here, or a helical gear, depending on how tight that is or how thin the gear is. The thicker the gear, the more you will need to use a helical gear. But for now, let's simplify things. We are going to use a spur gear for demonstrating how we are going to draw a worm gear. So the worm gear is basically a thread, an extended thread on a long shaft. It's almost like a screw on a shaft placed on top of the spur gear. I'm going to use my cube drawing device because I want to have neat circles just to demonstrate and explain what we need to look at. But before we get to that, if you cut the shaft and look at it from the side, you will see this. So we've got the shaft in here, it goes up and up like that, and then we've got those teeth standing up like that. But we want to use that principle when we draw the teeth in here. So I'm just going to explain quickly which part we are going to use of this. So we're going to use the flat top, the downward section, and this part. So we are going to repeat this so that we can draw that spiral thread that goes onto the shaft. So let me stop mumbling and let's get to it. So if you look, let's quickly draw a circle here. Right. So remember that we said we are going to use the flat side of this. So the top of this. Okay, so yeah, let's do it here. So that's the top of the thread or the gear. Then we go down for the depth of that gear, and then we need to come back again so that the teeth of this gear fits into the base of worm gear. Right, so I want to create different colors for the different areas. So we need to use that same length there. This time it comes in towards the center, always towards the center. We need to use the same distance, and then it needs to go out for the flat or the base of that. Let's use a yellow color. Something like that. So at the bottom, it's going to look the same as the top, but inverted. So it goes up. And we need to use the same length, more or less, there as well. It goes in like that. Right, and then the same here. Let's use a red. So it comes out. And it needs to be the same length as all of those. Goes in and then out again. Now, let's make this accurate. To make this accurate, I'm going to move this forward. And we need to make sure, let's duplicate that, move it forward by how thick, how thick the thread needs to be. Then on the red line, I'm going to use a green line for the top. So that the thread is going to be that thick. So let's use green for the thickness. And then I'm going to do at the bottom as well. And here. Right. And let's add a few more in the middle. So between these two, I need another one there. Between these two, I need another one there. So we won't see, that's basically the edge of this, and then we need another one in there. Right, so that's the thickness of the thread. Then we need to change this or make it smaller for the depth of the thread. So that's going to be the depth of the thread. Right. Then let's pick another color, maybe a blue for the depth. Okay, try to draw it straight to the center. Make sure you pick the correct layer. We need the next one is we need the base depth of that. So we need to bring this forward. Almost as thick as one of the teeth we've got there. Right. Let's keep that. Just to lower the opacity. Right, and then back to our drawing layer, and let's make that a red color. So this needs to follow the grid again. This is basically what we want. So this is the width of the thread. That's the depth of the thread, and that's the width of the base of the thread. So basically on the inside of the spiral. Right. So I'm gonna select the outer edge of this. Control C, Control V, and then using the T tool, bring it forward so that it lines up with these edges. I'm going to lower the opacity slightly, and then Control J, bring it forward yet again, because this time we want to mimic where the next one will lie. So, and then let's merge all of that together. Okay, so you'll see we've got the basics of it. Control J, T to bring it backward, and you'll see now what we need to do is we need to line that up with that edge. And I'll explain why we do this and how we are going to get to that. So let's repeat that 4 or 5 times. Let's lower the opacity and create a new layer. This is going to be our worm gear rough. Rough, like so, brush. So what we want to do is, now if you look closely, you'll see that we've got the top. Let's change it to a different color, something that stands out. Let's do that. So that's this is going to be the top of the gear. So let's pick that one there, and it needs to spiral to the back. So we need to pick one that's, so we want to bring this spiral so that it goes to the back. So we make a mark there. That's the top of the thread. Then at the apex we draw another line there, but now we take it one backwards, right? And then at the quarter here, at this quarter, we bring it back one more, right? So, and here we need to bring it one back more. Okay, it will make sense. So if you follow this circle here, let's change the color. So Let's make it a color like this. So this one goes in here, this one goes in here, and then this one goes in here, and then if we had to follow it, it will go back one more. So what we are trying to do is take it back and back and back. Right, so just try to remember that it's going to be it's going to be there. Then it's coming up and moving one back. It's coming down and moving one back. It's coming down and moving one back. And it's coming down and moving one back. So we need to, it's going to be 1, 1, 2, and then it comes down and one back. No, down and one back. So that's the whole spiral. Right, let's test that. We're not going to do the back, but it will make sense. It's messy. I know it's messy. So I want to connect that one, and I want to connect it with that one. Okay, then I want to connect it with that one, which connects with that one. Then we do the same for the other side of the thread. I wish there was a simpler method of explaining that. Maybe there is, but I don't know it yet. Hopefully this will show you a method, or maybe it gives you a solution to find a better way to draw this. Now, let's change the color to maybe dark purple, and that's for the part that goes in. So we need to draw that. So now on each of these, draw it in. So it goes in towards the, so this is the downward part of the thread. So, and we repeat the process. For the base of that spiral or thread, we are going this way again, this way again. Let's make it a different color. This is not working. Let's make it a dark turquoise color. So it goes like that, and then there, and okay, this is going to be there. Right, so let's color this in a little bit more so that it's better understood. So that's the top of the thread. This is the depth of the thread. And this is the base of the thread. Can you see how it spirals from the front to the back? And maybe it spirals a bit too steep, but let's ignore that. But this is the way you get it to spiral to the back. Now we want to clean this up. So create a new layer on top of that. Press D on the keyboard to set to default color, black and white in other words. And now we just want to clean this up. Let's close it up, make sure that there are no gaps. And now you can see how it spirals from the front to the back. I'm going to merge that into one layer. Make sure that you've got your grid available again. And then I'm going to place it on the grid about there. Right, duplicate it, bring it forward. Control E. And all we need to do now is draw the shaft for this monstrosity. We are just gonna cheat this little bit here. It's slightly wider than it should be, but we're not gonna tell everyone about this, are we? We'll keep it between us. Right. So, and then Control E or Control G, whatever you prefer. And let's fit it over that gear. Now, if this worm gear turns, it will rotate that gear. But if this gear if you try to rotate this gear, it won't rotate. So this is how this force is applied. So the force comes through the worm gear and it goes to the worm wheel, and the worm wheel delivers the rotation. But if the rotation is reversed, it won't go anywhere. So this gear is excellent for one directional rotation. And that concludes it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed this lesson about gears and that you've learned something, even if you only draw the spur gear. I'm happy that you have the knowledge how to do that now. The helical gear is not that difficult. It's just a spur gear with a twist in its body. And then the bevel gear is also not that difficult, a little bit more complex. And I think the most challenging one might be the worm gear. You have to think the whole time. So it's not a straightforward gear, but it's doable if you break it down into simple steps and in layers. See you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.